Sandra turned 40 in March. Her friends threw her a party. There were flowers and a cake and a playlist from the year she graduated high school. People gave speeches about how great she looked and how much she'd accomplished and how 40 was just the beginning. She smiled through all of it. She hugged people. She meant it when she said she'd had a wonderful evening. Then she drove home, sat in her car in the driveway for 11 minutes, and did the math. She had $34,000 in a retirement account she hadn't contributed to in 2 years. She had $8,000 in savings. She had a credit card balance she'd been carrying for long enough that she'd stopped thinking of it as temporary. She owned no property. She had spent her 30s building a career that paid reasonably well, raising 2 kids mostly on her own after a divorce at 34, and managing a financial life that required nearly everything she earned just to sustain it. She hadn't been reckless. She hadn't been irresponsible. She had been surviving consistently at a level that left almost nothing for building. She sat in that car and felt the specific weight of a number. Not 40. The other number. The retirement savings number she had read in an article the previous week, the one that said the average person should have 3 times their annual salary saved by 40. She earned $68,000. 3 times that was $204,000. She had $34,000. She was $170,000 behind a benchmark she had just learned existed. She went inside and didn't sleep well. Now I want to tell you about her college roommate, Patricia. Patricia had also turned 40 that year, 2 months earlier. She had $310,000 in retirement accounts, a home with meaningful equity, and a financial plan she reviewed every January with enough clarity and calm that she could describe it to you in under 5 minutes. She was not wealthy in any extraordinary sense. She had not earned dramatically more than Sandra over the years. She had not received an inheritance or married into money or gotten lucky with a single investment. She had simply made a set of decisions, starting in her early 30s, that she had sustained consistently enough that the math had compounded in her favor rather than against her. But here is the part of Patricia's story that Sandra didn't know. At 38, Patricia had felt behind too. Significantly behind. She had looked at her accounts and felt the same specific shame that Sandra felt in the driveway. The difference was what she did in the 2 years that followed. Not dramatic things. Not heroic sacrifice. A set of specific, concrete, executable decisions that anyone with a moderate income and a clear enough head can make. Sandra is sitting in a driveway. Patricia started from that same driveway. Pause. Music fades in softly. This isn't about how far behind you are. It's about what the next 10 years can actually do if you stop measuring yourself against a benchmark designed to make you feel inadequate and start building a plan designed for where you actually are right now. Because 40 is not too late. Not even close. But it does require a different strategy than the one that works at 30, and almost nobody explains what that strategy actually looks like in specific, practical terms for someone who is starting from behind, has real obligations, and doesn't have the luxury of abstract long-term thinking. They need a plan that works in the real world they're actually living in. I'm going to show you the real rules of financial recovery and acceleration at 40, the specific mindset shifts, the mathematical realities that are more encouraging than you think, the concrete actions that produce the fastest results from this starting point, and the mistakes that people in this exact position make that cost them years of progress they cannot afford to lose. These are the things nobody tells you when you're staring at a retirement account balance that doesn't match the benchmark. And understanding them might be the most important financial shift you make in this decade. Transition to core content. Rule 1. The benchmark that made you feel behind is not your plan. It is a population average that tells you nothing useful about your specific situation or your actual path forward. The 3-time salary benchmark Sandra encountered is a real guideline from a real source. It is also, as a planning tool for an individual person in a specific situation, almost completely useless. It is a median. It describes the midpoint of a distribution. It tells you where the average person is at 40, which means approximately half of all 40-year-olds are below it. You are not failing by being below the median. You are being the median, in the sense that the median is designed to include people like you. But more importantly, the benchmark doesn't know you. It doesn't know your income trajectory, your specific expenses, when you plan to retire, what retirement actually costs in your vision of it, your social security projection, your family situation, or any of the dozens of variables that actually determine whether you'll be financially secure in your 60s. It's a rough population-level heuristic being applied to an individual life, and the match is almost never precise. The hidden consequence of using the benchmark as your primary metric is that it produces either false comfort if you're above it or paralyzing shame if you're below it, and neither of those emotional states is useful for making good financial decisions. Shame, in particular, is one of the most reliable predictors of financial avoidance. People who feel deeply behind tend to look at their finances less, not more, because looking is painful. And looking less guarantees the gap grows wider. The replacement for the benchmark is a personal projection, not a comparison to others. A calculation built on your numbers, your timeline, and your actual goals. That projection might show a gap that is larger than you feared, or smaller, or completely different in shape. But it will show you something actionable rather than something that just makes you feel inadequate. Rule 2. At 40, you have exactly the right amount of time to make compounding work meaningfully in your favor, but only if you start treating time as the non-renewable resource it is. Here is the mathematics that most people in Sandra's position have never seen laid out plainly. If Sandra begins contributing $500 per month to a retirement account starting today, at a 7% average annual return, by the time she is 67, the current full Social Security retirement age, she will have accumulated approximately $284,000 from those contributions alone. Add her existing $34,000, which will grow to approximately $185,000 over the same 27 years at 7%. And her total retirement savings without any other action is approximately $469,000. That number is not the benchmark. It is also not nothing. It is a real foundation for a real retirement, especially combined with Social Security benefits she has been earning throughout her working life. Now adjust the variables. If she increases the contribution to $800 per month, the total approaches $640,000. If she reduces her expected retirement age to 62, the calculation changes but is still workable with the right strategy. Every variable in this equation is within her control to some degree. The benchmark is not a variable. It is a fixed post she is measuring herself against. Her actual retirement security is a function of choices she has the power to make. But here's what most people miss. The next 5 years are the most important 5 years in this calculation. Not because of the contributions themselves, but because of the time those contributions have to compound. $1 invested at 40 has 27 years to work before retirement. $1 invested at 45 has 22. The 5-year difference in compounding on the same dollar is approximately 40% in final value. Every year of delay is not a neutral pause. It is a permanent reduction in the value of every dollar invested from that point forward. Time is the one input in this equation that cannot be recovered. Everything else, contribution amount, investment selection, expense reduction, can be adjusted, optimized, and improved. The years cannot be reclaimed. Rule 3. The financial decisions that matter most at 40 are completely different from the ones that mattered at 30, and most people are still optimizing for the wrong things. At 30, the most important financial decision is usually whether to start investing at all. The amounts are smaller, the behavior is being established, and the primary leverage is time. Get money into the market and leave it there. That's most of the work. At 40, the most important financial decisions are about efficiency. You have less time for compounding to work, which means every dollar needs to be deployed more intentionally. The inefficiencies that were tolerable at 30, the slightly too high expense ratio, the suboptimal tax structure, the debt that's been carried a little too long, the insurance premiums that have never been reviewed, become genuinely costly in the compressed timeline of your 40s and 50s. Specifically, 3 decisions produce the most impact at this stage. The first is eliminating high-interest debt as rapidly as possible, because debt at 15 to 22% is a guaranteed negative return that no investment can reliably outperform. The second is maximizing contributions to tax-advantaged accounts, because the tax savings at this income level and tax bracket are substantial and compound over the remaining working years. The third is reviewing every major expense category for efficiency, not to live dramatically smaller, but to redirect money from things that produce low satisfaction to the investment contributions that produce the greatest long-term impact. The hidden consequence of continuing to optimize for the wrong things, continuing to focus primarily on income growth while ignoring expense efficiency and investment structure, is that income increases get absorbed into the existing financial structure rather than changing it. Sandra has received raises in the last 5 years. Her retirement account has not grown proportionally. The raises went somewhere. Efficiency is the discipline of making them go somewhere useful. Rule 4. Catch-up contributions exist specifically for people in Sandra's position, and most people who need them most have never heard of them. This is one of the most practically valuable pieces of information in this entire video, and it is almost never prominently featured in personal finance content aimed at people who feel behind. The IRS allows workers aged 50 and older to contribute more to retirement accounts than younger workers. For 2024, the standard 401k contribution limit is $23,000. Workers 50 and older can contribute an additional $7,500 as a catch-up contribution, bringing their total allowable 401k contribution to $30,500. The same catch-up provision applies to IRAs, an additional $1,000 beyond the standard $7,000 limit for those 50 and over. Sandra is 40, not 50. But she is 10 years away from accessing catch-up contributions. That matters for planning because the last decade before retirement, when catch-up contributions are available and when the combination of higher income, reduced family expenses, and cleared debt often frees up more cash, can be the most productive decade of her entire saving life. I'm not done yet. The tax benefit of these contributions is substantial. If Sandra is in the 22% federal tax bracket when she's 55 and contributing the maximum, including catch-up, $30,500 to her 401k, her annual tax savings from those contributions alone is approximately $6,710 in federal taxes. Money that would have gone to the government stays in her retirement account, compounding for the remainder of her working years. The catch-up provision is Congress's acknowledgement that life doesn't always allow people to save optimally in their youth. It is not a consolation prize. It is a genuine, substantial mechanism for accelerating retirement savings in the years when many people are finally positioned to use it. Rule 5. Social Security is a meaningful retirement asset that most people in Sandra's position dramatically undervalue in their calculations. When people calculate how far behind they are, they typically count only their investment accounts. They compare their 401k balance to the benchmark, find the gap, and feel the corresponding weight of it. They are calculating their retirement resources incorrectly. Social Security, for most middle-income workers with consistent employment histories, represents a substantial retirement income stream. The average Social Security benefit in 2024 is approximately $1,907 per month. For a worker with Sandra's income history, the benefit could reasonably fall between $1,800 and $2,400 per month, depending on her full earnings record and the age at which she begins claiming. To put that in portfolio terms, a monthly income of $2,000 from Social Security is the equivalent of having approximately $480,000 invested at a 5% withdrawal rate. If you've been calculating your retirement readiness without including your Social Security projection, you have been understating your resources by an amount that is likely equivalent to several $100,000 in portfolio value. The practical action is to create an account at ssa.gov and access your Social Security statement. It will show you your projected benefit at 3 claiming ages: 62, your full retirement age, and 70. That projection, added to your investment account projection, gives you a materially more accurate and almost certainly more encouraging picture of your retirement trajectory than your investment account balance alone. But here's what most people miss. Claiming age matters enormously. Claiming at 62 versus waiting until 70 produces a benefit difference of approximately 76%. For every year you delay claiming beyond your full retirement age, your benefit increases by 8%. That guaranteed 8% annual increase is one of the best risk-adjusted returns available anywhere in the financial landscape. Understanding this transforms Social Security from a passive background assumption into an active strategic variable in your retirement plan. Rule 6. The single most destructive financial behavior at 40 is avoidance, and the financial industry has accidentally created the perfect conditions for it. Sandra didn't look at her retirement account for 2 years. She knew the number was there. She knew it wasn't growing. Looking at it felt like confronting something she couldn't fix, so she didn't look. The account sat. The contributions stopped. The number stayed small. This pattern, financial avoidance driven by shame or overwhelm, is one of the most consistent findings in behavioral finance research. People who feel behind are less likely to engage with their finances, not more. The gap creates a psychological feedback loop where the pain of looking produces avoidance. Avoidance produces more distance from the problem, and more distance makes the eventual reckoning feel more overwhelming rather than less. The financial industry's design makes this worse, not better. Retirement account interfaces that show you your balance relative to a projected retirement need, in red, are not motivating. They are demoralizing. Research on retirement savings behavior consistently shows that deficit framing, showing people how far they are from their goal, produces less action, not more, particularly among people who are significantly behind. Progress framing, showing people how much they've built and what consistent contributions will add, produces better outcomes. The practical implication is this: you need to look. Not because looking is comfortable, but because avoidance is the most expensive financial decision you can make. Every month you don't look is a month where the contributions don't happen, the plan doesn't exist, and the compounding doesn't start. The discomfort of looking is real. The cost of not looking is larger. Set a calendar event. Put it on a Sunday. Give it a name that doesn't feel like a punishment. Open every account. Write down every number. Then close the laptop and give yourself credit for having looked, because looking, when you're behind and afraid of what you'll see, is genuinely the hardest and most important step. Rule 7. Your 40s are likely to be your highest earning decade, and most people spend those earnings on lifestyle rather than acceleration. Income typically peaks in the late 40s and early 50s for most professional workers. The combination of accumulated experience, established reputation, and senior positioning produces earning potential that most people in their 30s haven't accessed yet. This means Sandra is likely approaching the most financially productive period of her working life, not moving away from it. The income she'll earn in the next decade is almost certainly higher, in aggregate, than the income she earned in the decade she just completed. The question is what she does with the increase. The pattern that most people in Sandra's position fall into is allowing lifestyle to expand in proportion to income. The raises come. The budget adjusts upward. The retirement contributions increase modestly, if at all. The net savings rate, the percentage of income being redirected to wealth building, stays roughly constant even as the absolute income rises. The higher income produces a more comfortable life, rather than a more financially secure future. The alternative is to treat each income increase as a split, part to lifestyle improvement, part to acceleration. Not 50-50 necessarily, and not a rigid rule, but a conscious, pre-committed decision that when income goes up, a defined portion of the increase goes directly to retirement contributions before the lifestyle has time to adjust around it. A $10,000 annual income increase treated this way, with $5,000 going to additional retirement contributions and $5,000 going to improved quality of life, produces dramatically different outcomes over a decade than the same $10,000 absorbed entirely into lifestyle. The math is straightforward. The discipline required is not extraordinary. It simply requires making the decision before the raise arrives rather than after, when the lifestyle has already claimed the money. Rule 8. Homeownership at 40 is not a prerequisite for financial security, and the pressure to own property can lead to financially destructive decisions at exactly the wrong time. Sandra doesn't own property. This is the fact that probably causes her the most additional shame beyond the retirement account gap. In the social accounting of adult financial achievement, home ownership by 40 is treated as a baseline expectation. The absence of it reads as failure. It isn't. Or rather, it isn't necessarily. It depends entirely on the specifics of her situation, her local housing market, and the financial terms on which ownership would be available to her. Here is the calculation that most of the social pressure around homeownership omits. Purchasing a home at the top of your financial capacity, with a down payment that drains your liquid savings and a monthly payment that eliminates your investment contribution margin, in order to own property by a socially expected age, is one of the most financially destructive decisions available to a person in Sandra's position. It trades long-term wealth-building capacity for a single asset that may or may not appreciate at a rate that justifies the sacrifice. Renting strategically while aggressively building retirement savings and an investment portfolio is a legitimate financial path. The decision between renting and buying should be made on the math of her specific situation, local price-to-rent ratios, her expected tenure in the area, the opportunity cost of the down payment, not on the social timeline that says ownership by 40 is required. But here's what most people miss. This is not an argument against homeownership. For many people in many markets, ownership is the right financial decision and an important component of long-term wealth building. The argument is against purchasing property because the social clock says it's time, at financial terms that compromise every other aspect of your financial recovery. The sequence matters. Getting the retirement foundation established before overextending on property may produce better long-term outcomes than the reverse. Rule 9. The people who successfully close large financial gaps in their 40s share one characteristic that has nothing to do with income or discipline. They stopped comparing and started planning. This is the rule that ties everything together, and it sounds simpler than it is. The comparison mindset, measuring yourself against benchmarks, against peers, against where you thought you'd be, produces a specific kind of pain that is simultaneously real and completely irrelevant to your actual financial future. It is real because the feelings are genuine and the social pressures are legitimate forces in your life. It is irrelevant because no amount of feeling behind actually changes the math of what is possible from where you stand right now. Patricia, Sandra's college roommate, made one internal shift at 38 that produced everything that followed. She stopped asking where she should be and started asking where she could get. Not a platitude. A genuine reorientation of the question she was bringing to her financial life. Where should I be by 40? Is a question with a fixed, discouraging answer. Where can I actually get by 60? Is a question with a variable, actionable answer that depends on decisions she has the power to make. The planning mindset produces different behavior than the comparison mindset because it gives every action a clear connection to a concrete outcome. Contributing $500 this month in the comparison mindset feels like attempting to close a $170,000 gap with an amount that is embarrassingly small relative to the problem. Contributing $500 this month in the planning mindset feels like adding to a projection that grows meaningfully with every contribution. The same action. Completely different psychological context. Dramatically different likelihood of continuation. Sandra's path forward is not to feel less bad about being behind. It is to stop relating to her situation as being behind and start relating to it as being at a specific starting point with a specific set of variables and a specific, calculable, genuinely achievable range of destinations. Rule 10. The next 10 years will determine your financial future more than the previous 20 did, and that is not a threat. It is a genuine and specific reason for hope. This is the rule I want you to carry out of this video. Here is why your 40s are actually the most financially consequential decade of your life, in a way that works in your favor rather than against you. You have more earning capacity now than you did at 30. You have more knowledge than you did at 30. You have, in all likelihood, more clarity about what you actually want your life to look like, which means you can build a financial plan aimed at something real rather than something vague. You have the benefit of seeing clearly, possibly for the first time, what the cost of financial avoidance looks like, which is one of the most powerful motivators available. And you have time. Not unlimited time. Not the time you would have had if you'd started earlier. but real, meaningful, mathematically significant time. 27 years to retirement at 67. 20 years to 60. Even 15 years to 55. These are not consolation prizes. At 7% annual returns, money doubles approximately every 10 years. Every dollar you invest today has the potential to be $2 in 10 years and $4 in 20. Patricia built $310,000 in retirement savings starting from a position of feeling behind at 38, not from a position of having it figured out at 25. From the same driveway Sandra is sitting in right now, 2 years earlier in the story. The story is not finished for Sandra. It is, in the most literal mathematical sense, just beginning to be written in the part that will actually matter. Transition to closing. Sandra sat in that driveway for 11 minutes. Then she went inside. 2 weeks later, she did something Patricia had done 2 years earlier at a nearly identical moment. She opened every account she had. She wrote every number down on a single piece of paper. She calculated, roughly but honestly, what consistent monthly contributions would produce by the time she was 65. She looked at the Social Security statement she'd never accessed. She added the two projections together. The number was not the benchmark. It was also not the catastrophe she had been imagining in the driveway. It was a real number, attached to real choices, leading to a real outcome that was genuinely achievable if she started, not if she solved everything, not if she earned more, not if the previous 20 years had gone differently, but simply if she started. She reinstated her retirement contribution the following Monday. She set it to 6%, which her employer matched to 3%. She made a calendar event for the first Sunday of every month. She gave it a name that didn't feel like punishment. She showed up to it. That was 14 months ago. Her retirement account balance today is $51,000. It is not $204,000. It is also $17,000 more than it was the night of her birthday party, which is $17,000 more than it would have been if she had stayed in the driveway. Patricia didn't start from ahead. She started from behind, and she started anyway. That is the entire distance between their positions. Not talent, not income, not luck. The decision to stop measuring the gap and start closing it. Here is the line I want to leave you with. The decade between 40 and 50 will pass regardless of what you do with it. The only question is what the numbers will look like when it does. You already know what to do. The only decision left is whether today is the day you start doing it. Outro, warm, unhurried, genuine. End card. If this video spoke to something you've been carrying quietly, share it with one person who needs to hear that 40 is not the end of the financial story. It might be the most important part. The next video in this series builds the exact month-by-month plan for someone starting from behind at 40, the sequence, the numbers, and the specific decisions that produce the most progress in the least time.